Thank you for being here with us today and talking about coaches, coaching, and specialists and their roles in the teachers' lives. We really do appreciate your thoughts on this process, and we want to talk about your thinking because this is it's a broad topic with many models and thought processes behind it. And so let's get right down to it. Describe for us your philosophy, if you will, regarding mathematics coaching.
Mathematics coaching, I think, is something that's really important to be student-centered. I say student-centered because the one thing that the teacher and the coach share is this desire to improve student learning. It could be student achievement, student engagement, student participation, but in some way, that's sort of this shared desire. And so they come together under that, and the conversation focuses on how can we improve that. And so my philosophy, I wouldn't call it a philosophy as much as a framework, but that we start with sort of broad goals for students. And so if we can come to an agreement about what those broad goals are for students, right now I would focus on the mathematical practices or mathematical processes, depending on which state you reside in. But those are really important goals for mathematical proficiency, and those to me are the place to ground the work of coaching, a student-centered approach focused on mathematical proficiency, and then being able to think about what are the skills that a coach needs, a teacher needs in the classroom in order to open up those opportunities for students to learn.
When we talk about coaching models, what are some key non-negotiable components to any model that you might?
Okay, certainly a non-negotiable that's tough for a coach is to never be in the evaluation role. Mm-hmm. And that's tricky because, of course, they could be observing a lesson in which they're giving feedback, but that feedback has to be completely separate from evaluation. And there can be pressures from administrators, and they can even be in a role where they're asked to do evaluation explicitly, but that's to me a definite non-negotiable. Another non-negotiable to me is being transparent. Building trust and rapport, and being very open with a teacher. I don't think it's possible to be an effective coach if you aren't open and transparent about the process and where you're trying to go, which goes back to being student-centered. Once you're student-centered, then you are clearly on the same page about what the goal is.
Let's turn to systemic thoughts and actions as an imperative from its time. What are some aspects of this that you believe can be and should be supported by coaches?
Coaches provide this sort of infrastructure building for systemic change. So when you have teachers that are at different places along their professional continuum that have different strengths, the coach provides this opportunity for differentiation within the system. So in and of themselves, they are part of a systemic need, much more so than, they can differentiate much more so than somebody coming to deliver a workshop. They understand the context of the work, they can differentiate for each teacher. I also think that coaches can navigate the system in ways to support the district-wide growth that may be needed in math. So for example, the coach might decide that rather than get all of the teachers together from one school to work, that he or she may get all of the third grade teachers from the entire district together. And that way third grade teachers can be together to really think deeply about the content and about the mathematical practices that they're teaching, and they can design their work. They can be thinking about their next coaching cycle. They can be doing work that's very specific to what they're doing in their own classroom. And coaches can navigate that well. They can also help teachers come to consensus around broad learning goals. So the teachers might agree that they want to work on increasing their students' engagement and productive struggle. And so as the coach identifies that as a need for an individual teacher, the teachers at a school, or teachers across the school, then the coach is in a position to try to make that something tangible and doable in a classroom, instead of just, putting that out there that this is our goal for the year. So it's that transition point. The coach serves in this sort of transition role between enacting it in the classroom and the broad visions that might be district incentives.
You mentioned learning goals in your last answer. And are there any strategies that you think coaches might find effective or productive in support of focusing teachers on those learning goals?
Right, so let's talk about learning goals for teachers.
Mm-hmm.
So the coach is thinking about the teacher learning in the way that the teacher might be thinking about student learning.
Mm-hmm.
So in our framework, we have, again, focused on the student first, but then what shifts might occur in the teacher's practice to open up these opportunities to learn. And those are big ideas, like increasing the focus on productive struggle, or being able to reinterpret mathematical authority being from the teacher to mathematical authority being from the student. And so those are broad learning goals, but then the coach can help them focus on what I would call a teaching skill, something very specific: participation of English language learners in a lesson, using a formative assessment, a variety of formative assessment tools, things like that. So these could be the learning goals for the teacher, very transparent, and then through lesson cycles and through whatever professional learning activities are planned, whatever collaborations are planned, then those very specific activities are the focus of that. What happens is if you focus on something specific, like the participation of English language learners, all of a sudden you see that that moves these shifts, these broader shifts of like engaging students in productive struggle and differentiation, and then that opens up these opportunities to learn. So you can zoom in on something little and it has this magnifying impact on teacher practice and then on student learning.
This is a complex activity, like teaching. And so what aspects of this activity are particularly challenging for teachers, do you think?
For teachers, I think that one of the challenges is feeling confident that what they might be encouraged to do is what they really need to be doing. And so that's why a student-centered approach is important, because I think we can, if they can see the connection between their teacher actions and student learning, then then they have the rationale, the justification to do that. So if you were to look at questioning, it's one thing to say higher level questions are good. It's another thing to look at a range of questions and say what opportunities do students have to engage in productive struggle, or what opportunities do students have to make connections when this is the question that you've asked or this is the feedback that you just gave. And so for them to reconcile their practice in light of student, desired student outcomes, then they have that sort of justification. So I think that that's a challenge for teachers. I think for teachers it's challenging to feel confident that what they're being asked to do really will make a difference in students. So being student-centered can help with that. I think teachers also might try something one time, and then it goes not the way they'd hoped it went, and then the coach is gone. And so they only have access from time to time with the coach. And so putting collaborative structures in place for teachers beyond the actual coach, the individual serving as the coach, is important. But I think that's tough with every new practice. If I work with pre-service to expert teachers, and those pre-service teachers are just learning how to open up a lesson in an engaging way. And then master teachers forget about that because they're just so masterful at it. But when you're coaching something new, you're right back to that beginning place of trying to figure out how to do it and how to do it well. And one lesson isn't enough. It's just one lesson is a chance to get feedback to then continue to work on it. So I think that that's a challenge to keep it in focus as a priority, even when the coach isn't there, is a challenge with all the competing, must-do things that a teacher does. It's hard to keep focused on that learning goal.
Absolutely. Teachers are very busy all the time.
Yes.
Let's shift to coaches real quick. What aspects of this work do you think is most challenging for a coach?
I think a coach has a couple of challenges. They themselves must be masters of differentiation. Right? They have teachers of a range of experience, teachers who have different priorities about what they want to work on. They have to establish relationships with teachers. They might have a 5-year relationship with one teacher and have just met another teacher. So they really have to be masters of differentiation. And that's challenging to do if they're planning a workshop or something. It's also hard to do if they're trying to do individual coaching cycles with people that are doing all sorts of different goals. So I think that's a huge challenge to decide whether it's productive for the school to have a shared learning goal, or whether the individuals in that school or district will have their own learning goals, and how those might play together or complement each other if they have different learning goals. Another challenge for a coach is teachers can ask anything under the sun They need help with formative assessment, English language learners, students with special needs, how to differentiate, that's a common one. What do I do with my students who aren't motivated, my students who are 3 years behind, my gifted students who are done early, and on and on and on. And the coaches, given very little time to really come up with really valid solutions that are manageable. And if these solutions were easy and manageable, they wouldn't be problems in the first place. So the coach is sort of on their own, I think, and that relates to another challenge for coaches, which is if their job isn't unique, it's usually very few other people doing a job that includes all the components of their job. And those other people like them are not necessarily accessible to them. They might be in the same district if it's a large district, but they might be far, far away if it's a smaller district. And if they're in a different state, the context can be different enough that it's hard to network. So I think for coaches to be able to find support structures, support people, support resources, with the high demands to meet the needs of all the teachers is an enormous undertaking.
Sounds like a tall order. To wrap it up, what questions would you have for people who are implementing coaching or supervising coaching or looking to maintain a coaching model? What questions would you have to maybe push their thinking or maybe warn them about?
I guess a question I would ask to coaches is what support structures are helpful. I think that collectively we have so much knowledge from the coaches across the country and other leaders that we can build what could be better help if we know what good help looks like. And so I feel like there is good help. NCSM has great resources. What else? What else is it that a coach may need or that could provide support? I wonder, as we try to formatively assess the impact of coaching on student learning, I also wonder how we might assess how certain coaching practices are able to most support teachers and support students then. So what might that look like? Is it the professional learning sort of workshops that coaches plan? Is it the coaching cycle? Are they the coaching conversations that happen after the coaching cycle? How might we learn more? I would be very curious to hear from coaches about that and to learn more about what they find to be particularly valuable in their setting, what's worked for them, and ways that we can share that, I think would be important. If I was to say one more thing about that, I want to go back to the student-centered approach. So as coaches are working with teachers, to what extent are they able to notice the impact that it has on students, and what kind of way do they work in students into the work that they're doing? So is it through teachers bringing in student work samples? Is it through the students, recording of student voice or documenting of, vignettes from the classroom? But how do they bring student voice into their coaching so that we can hear more about really the ultimate goal, student learning?
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for being with us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.